Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Uzo Ehiogu. Now, I've actually had to stop Uzo from telling me half of this podcast before we actually started recording because we had a really good chat about things. So I'm very much looking forward to this today. So Uzo, thank you for joining.
Hey, how you doing, Andy?
So we're going to crack on with your job title. So we had an interesting discussion on this just now. So you're a consultant in rehab and S&C. So do you want to talk me through that? Because I found it really interesting, your perspective on how to look at it.
Yeah, hi Andy, hi, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, so consultant in rehabilitation, musculoskeletal rehabilitation, and also strength and conditioning. It's a funny one, really, because it's a job title that I've created myself, and the reason why I've created it myself is because what I've realised, or what I found, was I sort of sat and straddled two professions. So about 4 years ago, I started a master's in strength and conditioning at St Mary's University, and one of the things they made us do, and one of the things that's really good in strength and conditioning, which I find different to physiotherapy, is they're big into philosophy. What's your philosophy? Who are you? What do you believe in? And how do you practice as a practitioner? And one of the things they made us do was they made us write what our philosophy was, and that was quite a reflective moment for me, because what I realized was actually I straddled two professions. I straddled physiotherapy and I also straddled strength and conditioning, and they both have slightly different philosophies in terms of where they're going to take a patient or where they're going to take an athlete. And so the more and more I thought about it, and the deeper I thought about it, I said, well, I kind of sit between the two. So I almost need to create a job title for myself that has meaning for me. And what had meaning for me was actually, well, I do a lot of work, which I'm sure we'll touch in, across multi-sports. So not only do I work in the NHS at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital as a clinical academic and like a teaching fellow, but I also work in physiotherapy in advanced practice in rehabilitation. And my patients can range from, someone I saw yesterday, very good athlete, 100-meter sprinter, very, very good, on the fringes of doing very, very well, with a persistent hamstring injury. But equally so, I could see, 97-year-old Doris, who actually wants to lift her shopping bag onto the bus, because that's going to allow her to be independent in society. But then also in a lot of my private work, I've got tumblers, I've got gymnasts, and I've got speed climbers, and I've also got mountain athletes who I create strength and conditioning programs for and manage them over the long term. So I kind of straddle between the two. So essentially, long story short, I think it's really important that actually, you won't always fit within the organizational boundaries that you work within. So yes, I work within the NHS and I have some organizational boundaries and I have a title in the NHS, but also privately I have a title, and it's really important, I think, to find your own way. So what I did there was, by the end of that 2,000-word paper, which is quite reflective actually, what I realized was, well, actually I do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of consulting with patients, a lot of consulting with athletes. I also do a lot of consulting in my educational work with other physiotherapists. I run courses. I have online courses. I consult at universities, so I'll go and lecture and teach on Masters of Science courses in physiotherapy around rehabilitation. So the more and more I thought about it, well, I'm a consultant, but it just so happens that it doesn't quite fit within the organizational boundaries, and that can be a challenge for people, because I'll often hear people say, well, yeah, but you're not a consultant in the National Health Service, are you? Well, it's a state of mind, isn't it, actually? And so you have to be comfortable with who you are and where you sit as a professional. And as I say, you might not necessarily fit within the tight domains of the organizational constraints that you work within, but you just have to be able to justify it. So that's essentially that's my title, and I'm quite comfortable with it actually, because it fits well with who I am and what I do and what my beliefs are, and professionally what I do. If that makes sense.
No, it does. I think it's really interesting because we've been going for nearly 11 years now, and we recently did our mission statement, and we got other people involved, and it's difficult. It's really difficult to say what, even for me as my company, it's like what is important, and we got there, and I'm happy with it. And it's about building relationships and educating, and within the space of MSK rehabilitation. But it's difficult to sort of do something because sometimes it can just sound like such BS when you're just like, we want to do this, and it's just like, so what?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's hard, isn't it? Because it's very easy, I think, to have a very neat, tight box of what you are and what you do. That's easy. It's much harder to actually break out of the box and to be unique, and I suspect people that listen to these types of podcasts are often in that same dilemma. Well, who am I? What do I do? I want to know what other people have done in the past, and I've spent plenty of time listening to autobiographies, reading about leadership, reading about different forms of leadership, having in leadership, having been in leadership in various different guises. And philosophy is important. Every single time, it always comes back down to, what's your philosophy? What do you believe in?
Yeah, no, I agree. So yeah, I think that would be interesting. So that's something that how early on did they ask you that in the course?
Normally about year two, actually. It was year two that that we had to write this piece. It was really, really, really good, because I'd never had to do it in physiotherapy. So I've got a master's in physiotherapy, and I've got a master's in strength and conditioning. And during that process, we were never really challenged to think quite deeply about that. And it may have been that at that stage of my career, I wasn't really in a position to think about that. But I think that's certainly one of the strengths of the strength and conditioning profession. They're big on philosophy, which I guess, can be, has strengths and weaknesses. But clearly, it's important to understand, that I think for me, it's important to understand, or certainly was for me to understand, that actually I straddle two professions. And then sometimes it can be really hard and it can be really challenging, because, there'll be some ideas and philosophy in physiotherapy which is an anathema to S&C, and vice versa. Yeah, there'll be some philosophies that are just completely different. Like, the classic one in S&C is injury prevention. They believe heavily in injury prevention. In physio, not so. If you look at mainstream physio, injury prevention, well, we can't prove it. Well, there's no evidence to support it. Well, there's no controlled randomized trial. There's no cohort studies. Therefore, why would you do it? You only need to go on Twitter. If you talk about injury prevention on Twitter in relation to physio, you'll get a barrage of people who will just throw abstracts at you. Oh, well, there's no evidence to support this. But then you go into S&C, and actually they're like, well, no, this is a part of our philosophy. Yeah, even if there isn't strong, robust, controlled, randomized trials, let's go back to first principles. If we improve the robustness of these tissues, does it make sense that this might actually provide or afford some protection against re-injury? Well, yeah, of course it does. It's like it's quite sensible from that perspective. And actually, the fact that they don't have RCTs, controlled randomized trials, and this, that, and the other, they're okay with that, and they're comfortable with that, because a part of their philosophy says that, well, this is what we do. And as I say, sometimes when you straddle between the two, I sometimes find myself saying, yeah, okay, I'll have my physio head on, and then I'll have my S&C head on. And sometimes, the S&C head is performance. Push the envelope of those tissues. The physio head is pull back a little bit, go a little bit slower. Let's let these tissues adapt at a much slower rate. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And sometimes there isn't a right or wrong answer. Sometimes it is about, well, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, well, we're going to follow this through based upon first principles, based upon the evidence that we have, if we have any research evidence. And actually, we're going to put the patient or the athlete right in the center, and we're going to allow them to make some decisions. So they're going to be completely involved in the process, as opposed to being on the periphery and stuff being decided for them. Do you know what I mean? For me, that almost brings everything together, really.
Yeah.
Then you're okay to make decisions that might not necessarily be completely, completely shrouded in this, where's the evidence? Because you hear it all the time. You only need to go onto social media to realize that actually, if people want to shut you up because you have a position, they'll just throw an abstract at you. Oh, look, here's an abstract. And you know what the funny thing is as well? This often makes me laugh. Yeah. I'm always wary of people who, when you're having a discussion on social media, they throw an abstract at you. Look, there you go, you're wrong. I'm like, okay, so let's just work this one out. So if you're throwing this abstract at me to support your argument, have you read the entire paper? Clearly not, because it took you 2.5 minutes to come back and throw this abstract at me. And I'm like, okay, so that kind of means that you haven't read it. Yeah. So you're throwing the abstract at me. And I'm like, well, that's like the worst type of argument, isn't it? Because you haven't even read it, mate. Like, but you think that's enough to keep me quiet, or to keep someone else quiet. And you see it all the time. And I just think, actually, do you know something? Don't do that. Yeah. Let's just have a discussion and let's agree to disagree, because sometimes neither of us are right. And that's all right. That's okay.
So do you think on those ones, because social media is massive and Twitter, as you mentioned, is rife for it. Why do you think that it's intelligent people that are doing this? It's other clinicians. Why do you think that those responses are very, very widespread?
Well, the thing about social media is it's easy to type something and to throw something at somebody. Yeah. And and also it's easy to be obnoxious as well, isn't it, on social media, because you're not in their face. Yeah. So for me to be obnoxious to you right now, looking at you right now, is really hard, because I'm looking, yes, we're online and we're virtual, but I'm looking at you in the face. It's a bit like, you go to a pub and you have a conversation with someone. You probably wouldn't be that obnoxious if you were going to be. You probably wouldn't. You would get into a discussion with someone, and you'd have a chat with someone over a pint or whatever it is, or a drink or a coffee or whatever. And you'd probably just be a little bit more polite. Whereas it seems to be, because they're not in front of you, it's easy to be a little bit obnoxious. And I find it all the time. And I guess, well, lucky or unlucky, I was the communications officer for the Musculoskeletal Association of Chartered Physiotherapists for about 5 or 6 years. So I spent a lot of time having to spend time thinking about replies, because I was posting information and replying to people as the communications officer for the association. So actually, I got to see a lot. Well, I got to spend a lot of time on social media. I got to hear and listen to quite a lot of people that had quite a lot of views, and some views, quite frankly, were just rude. Yeah, it's the sort of things you wouldn't say to someone to their face. You just wouldn't do it. So I got very used to actually having to just think before I reply. So now my approach now, even if I think I might be right, and I think someone's like, actually, really, is just to be nice. To be nice, and and even if I've got quite strong opinions, always to finish it with, well, but I could be wrong, actually. Or the classic one is, but context matters. So actually, because it's hard, isn't it? You have a conversation with someone about something clinically online, and it's like, well, you're not there, you're not with that patient, you're unable, as the person reading whatever it is that's been posted, or you look at an exercise and you want to criticize it because the technique's not right, or because you wouldn't do it in this situation, or you wouldn't do it in that situation, or there's something that you just don't like about it. Okay, you're not able to almost to see the context that that particular thing happened in. Yeah, and the context will always be important, and the context will always matter, you know, and the optics of that environment, you know. So I'm doing this because actually this patient doesn't have access to this, doesn't have access to really high quality kit. They came in this morning and they were in tears, because, you know, yeah, their life's falling apart outside of physio. So what I did was actually I decided that I was going to massage their leg, because, or I was going to massage their back, or I was going to put acupuncture needles into wherever, which would be an anathema for most people on Twitter. What, you used acupuncture? You used TENS? Oh my God, you're a terrible physio. Oh my God, you're a terrible clinician, because that's a passive technique. It's passive. That's creating, you know, that's creating dependence between you and the patient. No, her life's falling apart. She came in today, and actually, right, the humane side of me said, I'm not going to go through your exercises today. Do you know something? I think you just need a break, don't you? I think you just need a break. You've come in, you look like shit. Yeah, you need a break. Right, so what we're going to do today is actually we're going to do some passive techniques today. So when you leave today, you feel better. And actually when you come in the next time, okay, I've built that, if you like, that friendship, that relationship between clinician and between patient. You trust me, you know that I get you and I get what's happening in your life, because while I'm doing that particular technique, I'm talking about what's happened in your life, and, you know, it's a bit of an agony aunt, this, that, and the other. And it might be with an athlete, it might be with a normal patient. And actually, what we're doing is we're building that therapeutic relationship. So when you come in the next time, okay, I'll be like, right, let's progress your rehab now. Where are we taking you? Yeah, there's buy-in, isn't there? And that's the context that you can never pick out in 240 characters.
Yeah.
When someone wants to criticize you, but it's so true, and we've all done it, and we've all looked at stuff and thought, really, why are you doing that? How does that make sense? You know, it's just, but it's easy to criticize, and it's much harder to take a step back and think, what's the context? What are the optics of that situation? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you find that role then? And that, how did you end up? We're going a bit off out of kilter here, but like just while we're on that topic, how did you find that that role?
Which one? The
communications one.
Oh
Like,
God!
how did you get it? And then
how did I get into
what
that?
was it like?
Well, how did I get into that? I was actually conned into it, really. I thought I was only going to do it for a year, and I was told it was really easy at the time. I just finished my master's in neuromusculoskeletal physio, and I can't remember what happened. I think it was my old university lecturer. She was the chair of the MACP back then, and I remember, yeah, no, I know what it was. I remember actually sending a message to the MACP about something about what they posted on social media. I was like, actually, do you know something? We haven't done ourselves justice here, because this could have been a better post. And I remember getting a message back saying, well, thank you for that. We are actually looking for a communications officer. If you fancy doing it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, at the time I was, I guess at the time I was, I sort of had the time, I didn't. I was head of physiotherapy at London Bridge Hospital, which was a private hospital in London. So I was head of department, and I thought, well, okay, you know, I could probably fit this in within my role. It's sort of, you know, communications officer, being head of department. I was involved in marketing and communications, so I thought that the two would sort of align. Anyway, I thought I'd do it for a year. 4 or 5 years later, I was still communications officer. And that's sort of how I got into it. But it was very good, because actually what I realized was it was very good to get involved with a professional association, because, you know, all of our professional associations, whether it's, you know, physios in sport, advanced practice, whether it's the acupuncture physios, or whether it's, you know, the MACP, everyone just thinks it works. And actually these organizations, okay, which, you know, support their members, they only work because you have volunteers who essentially give up their time to run the association, and so, you know, that's why they work, basically. So yeah, you know, I think they're important. I mean, they're highly politicized, and, you know, there is always a party line. So when I was a communications officer, there was always a line. There was always a party line. You know, I couldn't be posting or tweeting or communicating as me. I had to obviously, you know, adhere to the party line, and there are just some unwritten rules. So once I was no longer the communications officer, I think it was interesting. I then felt more able to communicate as me on my, you know, because even my social media feed, even my own Twitter feed, I still had to be super professional, because many people knew that I was a communications officer for the MACP.
Yeah.
So you sometimes can't split the two apart, and you probably shouldn't, actually, because there is clearly an association. But that's about leadership as well, isn't it? You know, it's realizing that actually, right, well, there are certain things which you can and can't do because of the position that you're in. Therefore, don't.
And so as that continued afterwards, or is that when you stop doing it, is then it's like, actually, no, that's giving me free reign, or what? How?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it gave me free reign, but also, you know, I'm a clinical academic and a physiotherapist at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital, where I am today. So actually, anything I post on social media, you know, I'm still associated, even though it's me and it's my account, I'm still associated with the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. So I guess in you know, deep down myself, I have this, you know, essentially, sounds old fashioned, but almost duty within my own self that says, okay, I am actually associated with the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. Therefore, you know, I still have to be relatively aware of what I'm posting, but also, you know, think about it at a much deeper level. It's, what type of person do you want to be? You know, do you want to be the person that swears online all the time, and that's what you're known for, and just wants to have, you know, fights on Twitter, or, you know, fights on Twitter or fights on social media, and just wants to be obnoxious? Or actually, do you want to be that person who is kind, and also, yes, whilst they are opinionated, they're also balanced in their opinions as well, and they can take other points on board? Do you want to be that person, or do you want to be the other person? The other person might improve your, you know, being that other person might improve your social media following, and might give you loads of followers and such like. But yeah, if you're happy with that, that's great. But if you're not, then again, comes back to philosophy, doesn't it? Who do you want to be? Why do you want to be that person? And how does that fit with you and your persona, and who you are in society? You know, what type of person do you want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so for you growing up, then, so where did you grow up, and how was that formed? Like, 'cause it's, again, it's happening all the time, isn't it, from our childhood
Yeah, of course it is.
who we want to be.
Yeah. So I was born in East London, actually. So I live in Birmingham now, and clearly I don't have a Birmingham accent, because everyone tells me that. Being around Brummies, they're like, "Well, you've got a Brummie accent. Where are you from?" In fact, you've got almost a nondescript accent to a certain extent, but every now and again the Cockney will come out. Depends who I'm talking to. So I was born in East London, Hackney, and yeah, so my parents are Nigerian. I had three brothers, one sister, and we were all pretty tight, to be honest with you. And yeah, I went to normal school, comprehensive school. Didn't do particularly well in school, actually. In fact, I did pretty badly in school, actually. It's ironic. I talk to my kids now, my two daughters, and and I'm like, yeah, I got like an unclassified in PE for my GCSE, and I said, but yeah, but now look, I'm kind of heavily in, exercise and physiotherapy and all things associated with the human body. So, so I think that's where my background started from. And I guess I guess things were quite hard, back then. We're talking like, 25 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. Things were quite hard. He worked really hard. My dad had two jobs. Like, my dad had two jobs, so he used to leave at about 4 o'clock in the morning, go to work. He would work from 4 in the morning, and then he would stop at about 11, come home for a bit. Then he'd go out again at about 2, and he'd have another job, and he'd work all the way through to about 8, 9 o'clock at night. Two jobs. My mum had a job as well. So, and she'd leave at about 7 in the morning, and then, she'd be back about 6. So essentially, siblings, parents were out working because they had to be out working. And, so whilst they were around, we were kind of responsible for looking after ourselves. So because we were brought up in a very strong Nigerian household, it was like, older brothers and sisters had to look after younger brothers and sisters because mum and dad were at work. So that was, so I guess that was quite a formative time. So very, very, very strong parents. They were very, very strong parents, and obviously had brothers and sisters who were also equally strong as well. And it was just it's odd, isn't it? Because there was a very strong work ethic that my dad had, which is crazy because I did so badly in my GCSEs. But the reason why I did so badly in my GCSEs, I think, is because, one, I didn't know what I wanted to go into, but two, also I didn't know that I was actually quite dyslexic, which loads of people are dyslexic now. Both kids are, my wife is as well, but I was dyslexic, so I didn't really understand. That, so that made education quite challenging. But certainly one of the things which I think was very instrumental was I always had an interest in the armed forces. So some of your listeners may or may not know, but I spent about 5 years as a physiotherapy officer in the British Army, and prior to that, I was a reservist in the Royal Marine Reserve and then the Special Boat Service Reserve for about 8 or 9 years. And again, that was quite formative because I think where I'd done so badly in school, I joined the cadets while I was in school, which kind of provided me with I guess, with, okay, I can do this. If I work hard, I can do this. It's not education, but if I work hard, I can do this. But deep down, even though I thought, I would love to join up at 16, I knew my parents would never sign on the dotted line. Absolutely not. And in a way, I'm quite grateful that they didn't. I'm grateful that they didn't, because if they had I'm guessing I wouldn't be here now today having this conversation with you. And a lot of other things wouldn't have taken place. But they were quite big on education. So what I then did was I joined the reserves at about 16 or 17, because that was an in-between, because I could still go to college. So that kept them happy, because I was still going to college and was still being educated, but I was still able to be within the armed forces. And that was quite instrumental, because I joined the Marines. And the Marines was hard. Like, let's not try and put any spin on this. It was hard. And it was very hard because it was just tough. It was really tough. It was physically demanding. It was mentally demanding. We started off, I think there must have been about 65 of us initially when we first started, who tried to get in, and then by the end 15 months later, out of that 65, there was probably about 8 of us that actually got to the end. Now, there's numerous reasons why people get to the end of it, or don't get to the end of it, rather. Sometimes it's because, life, family situation, work situations. Sometimes you get injured. Sometimes you're just not fit enough. Sometimes you're just not mentally strong enough. But from that 65, 8 of us finished, and we were awarded, the coveted Green Beret, which actually was everything. That's all we wanted. For 15 months, I'd spent pretty much 15 months of my life at 17 when I should have been out raving. I kind of went out raving a little bit, but when I should have been out running, exercising, doing things, being away at weekends. And that was very good, because I think what that showed me, it showed me numerous things, really. I guess it showed me that I was from East London, poor, had very little, and I was young. I was one of the youngest there as well, and I was surrounded by people who were older than me. One, who didn't look like me, so they were a different colour to me. We were thinking this is the early 90s, yeah. So there was 3 black guys, okay, out of 65, yeah, and they didn't look like me. Most of them, they all had jobs. So, from stockbroker all the way down to, plumber, because obviously we were all reservists. I had bloody holes in my trainers, mate. I had to get to, I couldn't afford the bus fare. To get from Hackney to Bermondsey, because I had to get 2 buses. Yeah, I had to get one bus to Liverpool Street Station in London, and I had to get another bus to get to Bermondsey. I couldn't afford the bus fare, so basically I borrowed a bike, and I used to ride across London with no lights, okay, to get to the reserve unit, because that was my only way of getting there. Yeah, and I was so determined to do it, and I always think back to that, and I think actually what that did in a way was that was probably the catalyst which said, do you know something? If you put your mind to stuff, you can do this. And then obviously I finished that. I became Commando trained at, I think it was 17 and a half. I got my Green Beret. And that was like the best thing ever. That was just amazing. And then I got my Green Beret. I had 2 stress fractures, one in the second metatarsal of the right leg, and I think one in the metatarsal of the left leg, like toes. And then I also had like non-freezing cold injury in my fingertips and also my hands as well, because it was just brutal. Like the course took place in the middle of winter, and it was just brutal. But I got to the end of it, and then I think the next step on the path was, okay, what do I do next? And I ended up going to university. I wanted to become a physio, but
just on that, Uzo. So were you
Yes,
doing stuff alongside that reservist then? Like
yeah,
college?
I was actually. So I was a so it's funny, isn't it? Because actually you fall into stuff, don't you? So when I went to college, after I flunked out of school, my GCSEs, yeah, I got a B in drama. Maths, I didn't even take maths. I think I got an unclassified in PE, and I think I got a D in English. Yeah. So for numerous reasons, my parents were like that. You either get a job, yeah, and it's not going to be in the army, so you get a proper job, or you go to college. So I went to college and I studied hotel catering and institutional operations. Yeah, I know. So I can cook. Right. There we go. So I spent 3 years doing that, and at the same time joined the reserves. So joined the Marine Reserve. I guess that was just like a holding. I needed something to do, so I did it. But so getting into physio, the funny thing about getting into physio was I didn't know I was going to get into physio. Yeah, I was in the Marines and I was keeping fit and I was into fitness, but I just did fitness. I didn't necessarily want to understand it, academically. But I was knocked off my bike in central London when I was probably 18. I was knocked off my bike while I was still studying catering. And anyway, I saw a physio. as you do. I had whiplash. Physio worked on my neck, and I was like, oh wow, okay, well this is quite interesting. How do I get into this then? This looks quite cool, you know. How do I get into this? And long story short, the physio actually was an ex-army physio, and he said, so I got talking to him. I was like, oh, you're an ex-army physio. So obviously, being in the Marine Reserve, I was like, oh, okay. And then we had this conversation, and he was like, well, yeah, you know, I had a degree in history, and then I converted it to a degree in physiotherapy, and then that's how I became a physio. So I got talking to him, and then I went back to the careers officer at college, and I said, well, okay, how do I get into physio? And they were like, you're studying catering, mate. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I want to get into physio. They were like, okay. And I forget the person's name, but she was really good actually. And she said, look, what you're going to have to do is you're either going to have to go back and do A levels, or you're going to have to go forwards and do a degree in something, basically. And at that point, I was like, I'm not going to do A levels because that one is not going to work. I'm like 18 by now. So I applied to do a foundation course in exercise and health studies, hoping that if I got through that, then I could apply to get on a degree in applied sports science. I got onto the degree in applied sports science. I went to the University of East London, really good university actually. You know, back then and still is now. So I did that, knowing that if I did well on that course, then I might be able to get into physio. But you know, by that point, I'd realised that actually I was going to have to work at this. I'd obviously been through the Marine training, so I had the mindset that I knew I was going to have to work at this. So I took a bit of a belt and braces approach, really. Basically, I worked my arse off. I treated the applied sports science course like it was a full-time job. Literally, it was a full-time job. Monday to Friday, I was either in lectures or I was studying. Sometimes on Saturday as well. Worked as a personal trainer, you know, to bring some money in on the side, which was good because I was able to apply what I was learning. So that was the start of doing courses where you can apply what you're learning. Got through that. At the same time as well, started writing to physiotherapy departments to see whether actually I could be an assistant, because people had said actually if you become an assistant then you got more chance of getting on the course, because we're talking this is like early 2000. There weren't many men and there weren't many people that looked like me in physio, basically. So it was sort of always one of those ones where okay, so I got a bit of a break, and I ended up at Homerton Hospital in East London as an assistant, basically. So one day a week I'd go in and I would just assist the physios, really just for experience. It was unpaid. I did that for a whole year during my second year and also some of my third year, and then finished the sports science degree. Luckily enough, got a first, and then I started the physio degree, and that's how I got into physio, basically.
Doesn't sound lucky. Doesn't sound lucky.
Well, do you know something? Do you know the thing about luck? Yeah, luck is, well, someone once said, and I really like to say it if I can remember it. Luck is about opportunity, isn't it? It's about having opportunities and taking those opportunities. That's luck. Luck is opportunities. Like, do you have the opportunity? Is there an opportunity there? And do you take it? Yeah, because there are opportunities, and some opportunities are not good opportunities, so you shouldn't take it. Yeah, but there are opportunities that arrive, which actually would be good opportunities, but people don't take them. And I think sometimes you just have to take opportunities, don't you? So yeah, no, you're right. It's opportunity and hard work.
Yeah, well, one of my favourite quotes, I think it was Gary Player that said it. It's like, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah,
like...
absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you do have to work smart though as well. I do think you do have to work smart, because there are times where, yeah, and my daughter says it to me as well sometimes. She says, Daddy, she's 14, and she says, Daddy, not every opportunity is a good opportunity. And that's really true, because sometimes you do have to work smart, because just because there's an opportunity doesn't mean it's a good opportunity. And you can work hard. Anyone can work hard. But sometimes you do have to pick where you want to work hard and where it's maybe not a good idea to. And I've realized that myself sometimes, where, you know, people will ask me, you know, will you come and do a talk here? Will you come and do a talk there? Will you come and do a talk there? And often I think, and I used to say yes all the time, but now I'm a bit more discerning, and I'm like, well, okay, if you're a charity and there's a good cause behind it, then I'll do it. You know, because often these gigs are not paid, which is fine. Sometimes they are, but often they're not. But often you do have to ask yourself the question: is this a good opportunity? Sometimes it's not, and it's an important one for your listeners, isn't it? Because actually, not every opportunity is a good opportunity. It's just like jobs as well. You know, jobs will come up. You know, the classic one at the moment is, you know, a lot of people are running away, are on the lookout for, you know, these first contact practitioner jobs, because, you know, for example, I'm a band 6 physio in the NHS. Well, it will get me to band 7, or maybe it'll get me to band 8 very, very quickly. Yeah, but do you really want to do that? Like, that's the question, isn't it? It's like, you know, yeah, but it'll get me more money. It will get you more money. But as I found out, you know, you can have a lot of money, but not enjoy your work. And actually, if you're going to spend a lot of time doing that, unless the money is significantly great, you know, tax free, you know, you know, a lot, then sometimes being satisfied with what you do work wise is probably better than taking the money. And sometimes, you know, those jobs are not as, for some people they'd be great, but for others, you know, it's not. You know, so I will counsel people sometimes where they say, oh yeah, I want to go for this, and I'm like, well, think carefully about whether you want that or not. You know, the classic one is jobs in elite sport. That's the classical one, isn't it? I want to work in elite sport. I want to work in elite sport. Do you really? Do you really want to work in elite sport? Do you really want to give up all of your weekends all the time? Do you really want to minimize, like, your patient caseload to from that to that? You know, do you really want to do that? Do you it looks like it's glamorous from the outside, but bear in mind, you know, you're on tour. When the players are chilling out, you're working. You're up first thing. You're up before all the players. When they have a day off, you're working, because you're still seeing patients. You'll still be seeing the players that need treatment. So you're not going to see the country. Yeah, you're just going to see the inside of a hotel room on the inside of a stadium. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's if you know that's what you want, then that's fine. But just bear in mind that not every opportunity is a good opportunity unless it's good for you.
Yeah, it's philosophy again, isn't it? It all comes back
definitely.
to that. Is like what you want to do. So no, I think they're really good points. And then, so once you've done your sports science, then was it something? Yeah, right, straight into physio, because that's been the plan.
Yeah, that was the plan, mate. The plan was, I knew it was going to be 6 years. It was going to be a 6-year slog, mate. So I went straight into physio. East London University, cracked on with that. That was great. Did that and then finished that. That was good. And again, you know, I was desperate that I was going to go into sport. I said I want to go into sport. All I wanted to do was I wanted to go into sport. One of my lecturers at the time, he said, you know, come into the end, he said, don't do it. He said, get a job in the NHS. He said, do your rotations in the NHS. It will set you up nicely. And now, I don't say this to everybody. Not everybody has to do their rotations in the NHS, of course not. But back then, it did set me up quite nicely. So I did some rotations in the NHS, and, you know, not all of it was great. Let me be honest with you, not all of it was great. You know, I did care of the elderly, intermediate care, paediatrics was great, orthopedics, and I had 2 outpatient rotations. Luckily, our rotations were only 4 months. So I did that, but I knew straight away I wanted to go into outpatients. So literally, even when I was on the care of the elderly, I was making a beeline to find out who in the department was good, like who are the good outpatient physios, and I made a beeline, like, to just, you know, to almost, you know, find out who they were, and to try and be around them, because I wanted to learn, because I knew that's where I wanted to go. So I was very, very focused. But I think the rotations, the good thing about the rotations was, you know, doing ITU and all that sort of stuff was, you know, it gave me a nice broad platform and a nice broad base, which even today I will still use today. Like, case in point, you know, someone comes in and they've got thoracic pain. Yeah, you know, I will still ask them, you know, the classic questions around, you know, do you have a cough? Do you have a wheeze? Any sputum? Any pain in and around the chest? Yeah. You know, dependent upon the history and what they tell me will depend if I nip next door and go into the inpatient office and grab a stethoscope and have a listen. Yeah, I can still listen to someone's chest now in outpatients, and I can still detect whether they've got breath sounds throughout and whether they've got any added sounds, you know, wheeze, creps and such like, because actually 20 years ago, yeah, I had that grounding of being on an ITU ward, yeah, and being on a surgical ward and listening to, you know, little old ladies and old men with COPD. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and these are the important things that actually, as you move through practice, whether you're in elite sport or whether you're in, you know, NHS outpress, it's musculoskeletal physiotherapy. Yeah. And musculoskeletal physiotherapy for me, it's just physiotherapy, isn't it? Really. It's like, you know, and again, back to philosophy, we like to break things up into individual subunits and into individual systems. I'm a musculoskeletal physiotherapist. I'm a respiratory physiotherapist. I'm a neurophysiotherapist. I'm a pediatric physiotherapist. I'm a this physiotherapist. I'm a women's health physiotherapist. Well, I'm like, well, you're a physiotherapist. Yeah. And actually, our training starts with being able to understand the human body and the movement system. So, you know, someone who comes in who is, you know, 8-9 weeks postpartum, yeah, I don't know anything about internal examinations, okay, for the pelvic floor, but I do know how to ask the right questions, okay, to establish if this is a problem. Yeah, and I can do a basic examination, not internal, because I don't do internals, but around the musculoskeletal system for this patient that has back pain or has sacroiliac joint pain. Equally so, the same principle applies to some of the pediatric patients that I work with. Yeah, privately, like a pediatric patient privately who has a sports injury. Well, I don't have a sports injury until you've ruled out the fact that actually it's not something else. Yeah, and for me, it's like, you know, the skills that we learn in neuro around improving movement. Well, that can be used in skill acquisition for your athletes, or that can be used for your patients in terms of relearning movement. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, the cardiorespiratory stuff that we've learned. So for me, like, we like to break things into boxes, yeah, because it's easy to manage. But actually, all we're really interested in is performance. What does performance mean to the patient or the athlete? You know, bringing it back to physio, it's about the patient. What does performance mean? Well, what does that patient need to be able to do? You know, Doris, who's 95, who wants to lift her shopping bag onto the bus, to get on the bus to go to Aldi to do her shopping so that she can remain independent in society. She needs aerobic fitness, but she might also have thoracic pain. Yeah, because, you know, she's had some problem there. That's your musculoskeletal assessment, but you've also got the cardiorespiratory assessment. But she might also be, you know, a bit doddery on her feet. Yeah, you know, so but equally so, that stuff can be applied philosophically to the athlete who's a semi-professional hockey player who's got groin pain. Do you know what I mean?
No, definitely. So from that then, it's like, what, from that time in the NHS, what did that make you want to go on and do then from there?
Join the army. So after that, I joined after that I joined the army as a physiotherapy officer. Because what I wanted to do was essentially, I was young, I just got married, and my missus at the time was a teacher, and we were talking about having a family. And I knew I wanted to do a master's in musculoskeletal physio because there was that thing that was just missing. I didn't, you know, I thought I was a good physio, but I wasn't really a good physio. Yeah, I thought I was a good physio. I wasn't really. And the reason why I wasn't good, and this is for me, because I didn't have a framework. Yeah, I didn't have a framework that actually I could hang my hat on when things became difficult. Yeah, easy stuff is easy stuff. If you've seen it 50 times and you know how to manage it, then you've seen it 50 times and you know how to manage it. It's when that thing or that patient comes in where it's not quite what you've seen before. It's something completely different. And then you need a framework, don't you? So you can make sense of that complexity. And I didn't really have that. Yeah. So basically, you know, everybody would get, well, you know, it's like anything, isn't it? You know, I would have my top 5 treatments of back pain. I laugh about it now, but I would have the top 5 treatments of back pain, and I would just try them and see what happened. Did the patient get better or not? Well, you know, that's just rubbish, isn't it? Really, that's not a thinking clinician. That's not a critical clinician. That's rubbish, and that falls apart if the patient doesn't get any better. Do you know what I'm saying? So actually, I needed a framework. So, and what I knew was that if I joined the army, one, I was going to be exposed to a lot of rehabilitation. 2, it was going to scratch an itch that I had. 3, if I could pass the interview and pass the test, I was going to be an officer. Which actually, you know, for someone who started from, you know, relatively low means, you know, to end up as an officer, just having been a private in the Marines, to end up as an officer, well, that was like the pinnacle, wasn't it? And I would be doing, I'd be doing physiotherapy. And at the time, obviously, Afghanistan and Iraq was kicking off, so there was a guaranteed that I was going to be deployed overseas. There was no question that I wasn't going to be deployed overseas. So I was literally rubbing my hands, thinking, "Hello, thank you very much. I'll have some of this." So I joined the army, did all my training, and then probably a year or 2 into it, I started applying for master's courses. I was like, you know, and the funny thing here is I was very focused. I was like, I want to get a master's out of this. You know, some of my colleagues were like, I want more management experience in the army. I want to go away and, you know, I want to go away with the sports teams, you know, to New Zealand, Barbados, and all that sort of stuff. I was like, nope, I want to get a master's. I want to get a master's. I want to be a better clinician. And also, like I was saying as well, my first posting was to Headley Court, and I left the NHS as a Band 7 physio, newly qualified Band 7 physio, or Senior 1 back then. And I thought I was good. And then I arrived at Headley Court, and I was like, oh no, I'm shit. Oh no. Oh, I'm going to have to up my game. We were talking, Leon Cleary, sports medicine doc. Well, he was a registrar. He was coming through Headley Court as a registrar, and he'll probably cringe when I say this, but I say this with great affection. But he was one of the best registrars that ever passed through there. He was on fire and on point. And I remember getting to Headley Court, you know, there was other people like John Houghton, who's a sports medicine doctor, who actually he was the doc for the Welsh team at the World Cup. John Houghton, he was a colonel at the time actually, and I remember getting to Headley Court and thinking, I'm a decent physio, I'm quite good here, and then actually being surrounded by these. One, they were outstanding physiotherapists, right? Absolutely outstanding. I know far too many names to mention. Also, being surrounded by exercise rehabilitation instructors, so the Army, Air Force, and Navy instructors who were also really good and outstanding when it came to rehabilitation. And then meeting these doctors, where you know, prior to that in the NHS, you know, most GPs had no idea, okay, about musculoskeletal medicine. Yeah, you know, I didn't have much exposure with orthopedic surgeons and rheumatologists, but generally the doctors that I've met weren't very good when it came to musculoskeletal examination and assessment. And then I got to Headley Court and I was like, oh, all the doctors are really good at examining the musculoskeletal system. So it was at that point I was like, no, I need to up my game. actually. And I think there was a situation where I'd sort of examined someone, and I remember this quite clearly. I'd examined someone's knee and I'd done a Lachman's test, and I had to go back and sort of, report my examination to, I think it was John Houghton, actually, who was the doctor in charge of this sports medicine clinic. I remember examining, doing a Lachman's test and on this patient, and going back and saying, yeah, the Lachman's was negative. And then John's like, okay. And then he comes out, takes a quick history, like literally a minute and a half's history, from the patient, asks some very, very salient questions, and gets a hold of the patient's knee and does that. And he's like, Uzo, are you sure that's a negative Lachman's? And he just gave me that look, and I was like, yeah, I think I might need to up my game. So at that point, I decided, right, yeah, I need to go away, and I need to do some additional training. So I did the masters at Brighton, under Nicky Petty, because a lot of people have said to me, look, if you're going to do one, do that one, because it's Nicky Petty, who was notorious for just being very, very rigorous, and the course being very, very hard. I did that, and it was really hard, actually. It was like really, really, really hard. But yeah, I finished it, did it over about 3 or 4 years, finished it. And I must say, it definitely, that was one of those moments where you think, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now. In musculoskeletal medicine, I met some great clinicians. The placements were super challenging, but they were really good. And the reason why they were really good, because look, you can do a master's, right? And you just have to write essays, and you have to answer exams. So theoretically, you're very good. You can do that, yeah? And you get your master's. But, the thing about the MACP masters was you had to go on a placement. And it wasn't like a portfolio placement where, oh yeah, I observed some clinic, I observed some, some clinicians in clinic, and I write a portfolio and I write some reflections on it. No, like, they're observing you, and it's a placement that lasts 6 or 7 weeks, and they're observing you, and it's structured mentoring, and then at the end of it, you've got an exam, and there's a new patient, and you don't know what that patient is until the morning of the exam, and you've got to kind of go through that process where you essentially take a history, physical exam, and then there's a viva at the end of it where they basically ask you questions about, well, what were you thinking, and why did you choose to do that, and why did you choose to do that, and so in a way, you can't hide. It's easy to sort of hide within the theory, and it's easy to hide within the research, which brings it back to Twitter when people throw abstracts at me. I'm like, okay, but so what? Like, what does this mean clinically? What are you going to do with that information? And so it was a very good thing to do, because what I found out about myself was I can write an essay and I can pass an exam. But actually, there was a few times where I had to resit my exam. I had to resit the practical exams a few times, and I was close. I was on my last go before I was going to be thrown off the course, because you can only resit it so many times. And I ended up going down to Wareham, and spending a week with this guy called Chris Mercer, who forever grateful for, because I had that week with him where he literally just said, right, let's strip apart what you're doing and let's work out why you keep failing. And if I hadn't had that week down there with Chris, I would have failed 100%. And then a few months later, came back and then passed. So yeah, there's some of those instrumental times in your career where you think, blimey, actually. So it was really good. So now I take students on placement, because I really value that mentored practice and what it did for me. So yeah, so that was physio, mate.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And then, so how long did you stay at DMRC for then? And then where did you go
So
after that?
DMRC, yeah. So I was at DMRC for about a year and a half. Then I got deployed to Afghanistan while I was at DMRC, and Headley Court. And then I got back from Afghanistan. Then I was posted to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which as a physio and rehab officer. So I was there for about 3 years. Got deployed to Afghanistan again while I was there. And then after that point, by that point, my kids were kind of coming up to sort of primary school age. So we made the decision that, because by that point I was coming to the end of my master's, and by that point we made the decision. We said, well, look, actually, what do we need to do? And so we wanted our part of it was being moved around, because my wife's a teacher. So every time you move around, one, your kids have to start a new school, and two, as well, if your wife has a job, she loses a job just to get another job. And actually, we got to that point where we were like, actually, can we take the financial hit every 2 years of my wife losing her job, de-skilling herself, the kids being moved from school to school? So we made the decision that actually we were going to step out of the army, and that's when I got this. I got a clinical specialist job, a band AA job, at in London, at London Bridge Hospital, which was a huge private hospital. So that was another part of the journey, really, and that was quite interesting because I got to see rehabilitation in the private sector, which had its strengths and weaknesses. And then from that, about a year, I ended up spending about 3 or 4 years there, actually, and I ended up becoming head of department, which was good because I got to lead a very big team. So I went from clinical specialist clinician to head of department, where we had 25 permanent members of staff, and we had about 40 people on the bank as well. Went for a CQC. It was the first time the hospital had been CQC, so I went for a CQC. So I got to see a lot of the management and leadership aspects associated with running a big team. Made loads of mistakes around managing people, and it was interesting because I'm quite big on people now. Bigger on people now than I probably was when I was in the armed forces, because I made so many big mistakes with managing people in my first year as a manager that I kind of paid for it the hard way. So now I'm very much mindful that actually people are people are your biggest resource, man. And it's systems are important, but actually it's the people that make systems work, and it's your people who look after your patients or look after the patients and the clients. So that's a biggie, really. That was a huge learning. That was huge learning for me, actually. Huge
What
learning.
would you say the core things of leadership and management then? What are the things that you now know that this should be really important in those areas?
Cool. So people, yeah, I mean, again, people are really important. Yeah, look after people. Yeah, if you look after your people, yeah, generally speaking, they will have loyalty. Yeah, and when you need help, they will help you. Yeah, because you've looked after them. Yeah, you've been nice to them. Okay, you've been caring of them when they've needed that care. Yeah, and they will remember that because they're humans at the end of the day. And that will then allow you to then focus on the rest of the business, but people first. So, for example, in my private clinic, if I take someone on in my private climbing clinic, I will pay them well, and I will take a much smaller percentage, of their income, and it's significantly better than all the other practices locally. Why? Because I want loyalty, and I want someone who's going to look after my patients who have come to my private clinic Inside Edge, and so you gain loyalty. So when times are hard, they'll be loyal. Yeah, And that's I guess that's something that's come via the army. I guess that's something that's come via working at London Bridge Hospital. That's one thing. Also, another thing as well is, everyone, if you're so focused on systems and processes and transaction and being quite transactional in your leadership, that's fine if that's what you need to do in order to get your returns in every month so that you keep your bosses up top happy. But you need to get the balance right between being transactional and being transformational. That transformational bit is where you look after people, you've got a vision, people are inspired, people are excited, about what it is you're saying, and where you think the future is. Of course, you can't just be transformational. You've got to have something behind this. You've got to have something behind that, and often you need people who can do the mundane, scheduling, the transactional stuff. Or you might have to do that transactional stuff yourself, but you have to get the balance right. And I've met people, and I've met, over the years, certainly, managers who are managers, they're not leaders. But there's a difference, isn't there? Like managers manage processes and systems. Leaders inspire. Now, sometimes you'll get a leader who actually doesn't have a clue about systems and processes. Okay, well, you need to put someone in place who does know that, or you need to learn a bit about yourself. And most people need to learn a bit about themselves, but you don't want to sit too heavily in one of the two. You kind of need a balance between the two, because that will get you where you need to be. And that's certainly what I've picked up in terms of leadership, and that will work across elite sport. That will work across the NHS. That will work across all domains, because leadership is essentially leadership is a transferable skill, isn't it? Leadership and management are transferable skills, essentially across multiple different domains. In short, be nice to your people, man. Be nice to people, because it goes a long way. It's just like it's even like on the wards. When I will sort of mentor fourth year medical students, I'll go onto a ward, and it's really interesting, isn't it? I'll walk into a ward, even though I'll see one of the sisters, or I'll see matron, or whatever it is, and it's quite old fashioned. But I'll walk in with some fourth year medics or whatever it is, and I'll say, "Good morning, sister," or "Good morning, Sister Tracy." And the reason why I do that is because you'll know, at the moment, nurses are going on strike. They don't particularly feel well valued, and I'm walking around with medical students who are going to be the next generation of medical leaders or whatever, and I'm like, look, okay, just be nice to people and be respectful of people. Like this person's worked really hard, okay, to become a sister or to become a matron. Now they might say, just call me Tracy. That's fine. We'll just call her Tracy. But start off with, good morning, matron. Good morning, sister. It's little things like that actually you want to bring people on board. I walk through the hospital, I'll say good morning to everybody, because whoever they are, stop and have a chat with someone, whoever they are.
No, I agree. No, I really appreciate your time on this today. It's been fascinating with just understanding it, and I definitely agree about. I mean, you just talking at the end there is like, I do not want to do processes. I want to know a little bit, but we've got great people that I'm trying to get involved in more, like the relationship building and culture development, strategy, all of that. That's what excites me. So we're trying to get, but some people then love doing processes, don't they? So it's like trying to get the right people in the right roles.
Absolutely, and there will be people. Like, when I was at London Bridge Hospital, I was very much the ideas. I was like, ideas, transformational strategy. Where are we taking this? Where are we going to take it? What are we going to do with it? And what I needed and what I had was my deputy, Anna. Actually, she loved writing policies and doing scheduling, and that was amazing because I hated it. I hated scheduling, and she was just so good at scheduling. But it was brilliant because she'd be the person who would say, I would be like, yeah, right, I think we should do this, and we should do this, and we should do this. This is the grand idea. This is where we're going to take it. And she'd be like, we haven't got enough staff to do that. We haven't got enough. Like, just the light is just.
It's all right.
in my hand. There we go. Yeah. It's a sensor, and she'd be like, yeah, we haven't got enough stuff for that. We need to put this in place. Okay, all right. Let me slow down then. But we need that, and you do need that. You need those people who literally, your business manager, who will kind of be the, who does the systems and processes. They might not necessarily be the person who has the ideas, and they might not necessarily be particularly good at networking and and marketing and so on, and doing that sort of stuff. So they might not be able to be the front person, if you like, but you need a balance between the two, and everybody should be valued for what they bring to.
No, absolutely. Look, really appreciate your time on this. Thank you for fitting me in, and I'll very much look forward to seeing you in, well, this is actually going to go out next year, so this year I'm going to say.
Pleasure.
Top man, great. Have a good one. Cheers, Uzo.
Pleasure, mate.
Thank you.
See ya.